Especially when we first become moms, we want to do everything just right, down to the sippy cups we buy.
I, for some reason, thought you just get one sippy cup and it lasts forever. So, I went down the internet wormholes for weeks looking for the right sippy cup. And I finally got it. It cost $12. I still remember that because it was a $12 sippy cup. And I knew it was one that was stainless steel. It's going to last her a long time, going to keep things insulated. There's like a straw in it. She's like, man, this is the sippy cup. She did not use it. She did not want it. She could not drink from it. Eventually I bought, quite a few more, landed on like the cheapest one, also with the straw. And now I know I have probably 100 sippy cups in a sippy cup graveyard.
Of course, we're not just talking about sippy cups here. As moms, we make a million decisions every day.
It all feels heavy and it all feels like there's only one right choice.
Yeah.
But it's just like the sippy cups. Like there isn't just one way to parent a 16-year-old who's struggling with friends. There's not one right answer that's going to work for us all.
This is the How She Moms podcast with Whitney Archibald. I'm a mother of 5 on a mission to help moms connect with your kids, manage your homes, and create your own unique version of motherhood. I curate ideas from different moms so you can pick and choose what works for you and your family. I'm really excited for today's episode with Monica Packer, host of the About Progress podcast. Since many of you have appreciated Monica's contributions to the last 2 episodes, how she feels mom guilt and how she deals with mom guilt, I decided I didn't want to keep the rest of our interview to myself. Monica and I had such an interesting conversation about the origins and impact of mom guilt and mom shame. But before we start the interview, I want to share a success story I had a few weeks ago with my family work charts. My son wanted me to do something for him that he was totally capable of doing for himself. He complained that he was way too busy to do it and that I had tons of time. After all, I'm a stay-at-home mom. Oh boy, if he thought he could convince me to do this for him, he said precisely the wrong thing. I started huffing and puffing and listing all the things I'd been busy with in that day alone. But before I really got going, I said, wait a second, and I ran to my room to grab the binder where I keep my family work charts. I sat down next to him and first opened up the Take Care of Myself chart, the one that shows the different categories of work required to take care of each person in the family. He was a little bit quiet. Then I turned to the next chart, the Take Care of My Family chart, which shows all the work required to run the whole house and take care of the family as a whole. I told him I don't mind doing this work. I chose to be a stay-at-home mom and take on most of the load of caring for the family. And I'm actually happy to help my kids when I can. But another part of my job is teaching my kids to take care of themselves. It was so nice to have a visual representation of the work to show him, so it wasn't just me lecturing on and on. Anyway, it was a nice little win with my charts. If you would like your own copies of the family work charts, you can download all 3 of the charts at howshemoms.com. Now, let's get to know Monica Packer. I'll let her introduce herself.
I'm Monica Packer. I'm a podcaster at About Progress primarily. I also do coaching as part of that, in addition to lots of teaching, both on the podcast and also just within my own groups that I have going on. And I'm a mom to 4 kids. They're ages 10 to just turned 4.
As you can imagine, at this stage of life and with all the mothers that she coaches, Monica has a lot of experience with mom guilt, her own and other people's. I started our interview by asking her about her personal experience with mom guilt.
It's interesting when I was looking through your questions and the topic, I admittedly was like, what is my relationship with mom guilt? Like, what have been my experiences there? And I kind of had to rack my brain a little bit in ways that I think are good, but also very indicative of how sneaky mom guilt is. Because, we all have those very obvious examples of getting judged at the grocery store by a stranger or someone in the family who disagrees with something you're doing with a child. We've all had, I think, at least one of those. But it's more of the in-between that seems more self-imposed and more about our own guilt being the main driver to mom guilt that I think is so sneaky, it's even hard to recognize it as quote unquote mom guilt. And so for me, it's more of this nagging voice in my brain that is harsh and all or nothing and using a lot of should language. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. Just a critical voice. And I really feel like when I look back on my parenting for, 10 years, I'm still pretty new at this mom gig. I feel like I'm just starting to get the hang of it, actually. But when I look back, it's more of that just undercurrent of my own criticism of myself that I see as the big problem. Although I could definitely do away with the random person on a sidewalk telling me what to do with my child, you know?
Right. And sometimes that's your own children. Like just happened right before I got on with you. I just had like a major blow up with my teenager. I was like,
Oh, you're not
okay,
alone.
now I'm going to go talk about mom guilt.
I know. And in many ways I think there are times where I do have to own that what I did was wrong. And Brene Brown talks about the difference between guilt and shame. But when I think we're really talking about mom guilt, I think we're really discussing mom shame. And
Yeah.
it's how we are shaming ourselves. Like guilt is a whole other conversation. Yes, like I did the same thing earlier this week. I did not deal well with a frustrated child who was taking something out on me, and I didn't deal well with it because I was already not doing great that day either. And that was a time to, recollect, think about what I could do better and apologize and repair and move forward. But most of the time it's that shaming voice. And it all comes back to me, is just this fear of not being enough, not
Yeah.
being a good enough mom, not doing enough for the kids, not teaching them enough, not being there enough. And it's just this hyper awareness of all of our inadequacies, which is for some reason in the driver's seat that I think is driving this mom shame bus, I guess we could call it. And that I think I'm constantly trying to be aware of and work on in ways I didn't even fully recognize until you brought up this topic.
Yeah. I think even when we're aware of the voice, we can still let that undercurrent stay there and creep up in moments like I just had. So is guilt a common theme that comes up when you're coaching other women?
Yes. For me, when I am coaching someone, they don't really say mom guilt, but they're doing the same should voice that I do. They're saying I should be doing this, I'm not doing this, and they're just really focusing on their own inadequacies and weaknesses and what they're not doing. And yeah, that comes up a lot. And it comes up from women who are at every age and at every stage. I surprisingly have a lot of women who work with me who have kids who've left the nest or may have left the nest a long time ago, and they're still on some levels struggling with mothering still.
Yeah.
And the shoulds that are there for sure.
Well, and maybe the shoulds have turned into what ifs at that point.
Oh yeah. And it's funny you say that, because that's an episode I'm working on, is one about regret, because regret is a really painful feeling.
Yeah.
And I think as we get older, we have more regret because we've lived more years and we have more ways of knowing that we could have done that differently. And I think that's definitely part of the conversation, right? That we're having.
Yeah.
As part of that mom guilt is regret and how it can kind of take over.
It's almost a subcategory of guilt, right?
Yes, for sure. And I have regrets. When people say I don't have any regrets, I'm like, BS. We all have regrets. Regrets aren't bad. It's what we do with them that counts. And I guess that's what they're really saying, is they've learned from their past mistakes. So in that regard, I guess I can give them that. But yeah, it's a whole other level. You're right.
Yeah. Well, have you read The Midnight Library?
Yes. Yeah.
So we just had our book club about it, and my friend gave it to me for Christmas, and it was a really cool gift. She marked different spots in the book and had a gift to open along with that. When I got to that point in the book, I could open the gift. And they were really creative and cool. It was so awesome. But the first gift that I had to open was when she got to the library, and it was a journal. And I was like, with the instructions that this is your book of regrets. And my first reaction was like, that is the dirtiest trick that anybody's ever played on me. Like, what? I have to write down all my regrets? That sounds miserable. But I sat down and kind of got to it. And I think in an interesting way, thinking about your regrets and writing them down gives you a very clear vision of your values. Because everything I was writing down was like, I wish I would have gotten to know this person better. I wish I would have stood up for this person in junior high. I wish they were all about relationships and being kind, basically. And that's not to be like, because I'm such a kind person, that's what my regrets were. But it refines your values when you think about what your regrets are about. And it was kind of a clarifying exercise for future choices that I make, like if I always choose kind, I will probably not have very many regrets, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm brave enough to do that exercise.
I know it was terrifying.
Yeah, I'm really impressed that you did it, but it also helps me think about maybe that's a good way to like expunge them, to get them all out and analyze them and instead like, extract what does this teach me about me?
Yeah. And it can be a really like it turned into a positive experience for me because I was like, oh, okay. I didn't make good choices there, but I'm really glad I recognized that. And I'm really glad that a lot of the big ones were pretty far in the past, So it helps you see some progress to look at your regrets.
That is true too.
Since that's what you're all about is progress. Yeah. So why do you think we use the term mom guilt as opposed to just general guilt?
Yeah, and I've never heard of dad guilt either. And that's not to knock down on the men because I'm so glad that I have a really awesome involved husband who's the father of our kids. But there is a different standard for us women socially, but also within our own minds. And I think a lot of that has to do with just how we wrap up our motherhood into our own identity.
Yeah.
How we view ourselves. It really is so deep. And I'm sure men do this too, but there's some other like hidden level, both socially and internally, that I think we do as women about my performance as a mom, meaning my kids' performance truly is indicative of who I am as a person and how good I am as that person. So I was reading an article yesterday, and I don't know if you've seen this, Whitney, like that cartoon that was kind of going around the past week of a side by side of a mom and a dad doing the same thing, but having a different label on it.
I saw that today, actually.
Yeah. So for the people who are listening, I'll just say the first slide is both a mom and dad wearing like joggers and like a relaxed shirt and holding up a bag that says fast food. And on the dad's side, it says fun dad. And on the mom's side, it says lazy mom. And so you're right. There is a lot of social constructs going on. But I read the article with the cartoonist who did it, and they asked her about what she was hearing feedback wise from it. And she said the ones that she did not expect were from like hundreds of women who were writing her to say, what you shared is so true, but that voice is actually the voice in my head. It's not other people saying you're a lazy mom, you're a bad mom, you're uninvolved, you're just a normal mom. It's my own voice. So it just shows how it's a social thing, but it's so embedded in the way we think, the way we act, the way we evaluate. It's hard to get out of. It's kind of in the very air we're breathing.
Yeah. Another thing I've been investigating with this topic is how many of our other emotions are we bundling up with this? Say you're a mom that has to go right back to work after you've had a baby. And we all know that that's usually way too soon because of the policies we have right now. That usually gets called mom guilt, like guilt for leaving your baby. But how much of that is just sadness and just actually just missing your baby instead of like, but when we add that layer of guilt, it makes us feel like we're doing something wrong when we should just be allowed to like grieve a little bit and be just sad about it instead of guilty and sad.
Ooh, that's so true. And I'm thinking about that even with our examples of not doing something the way we would like to with their kids. Is maybe that's the separation of the shame and the guilt is allowing yourself to have the emotions of disappointment in yourself.
Yeah.
And knowing you should have done and wanted to do better and letting those be there so that you can process them and move through them versus letting it just attach itself to this whole bus of other shame that we're just carrying around with us at all times. That's a really good point.
Yeah, I think disappointment is one. I think sadness is one. Sometimes it's just loneliness or, I hear from so many lonely moms. And it doesn't seem like that would be related to guilt, but I think it, all those negative emotions, somehow we can channel into that and make this big mess for ourselves.
I think of exhaustion too,
Yeah.
you know, as well as, just like I said, that voice to me is speaking a lot of shoulds. So
Yeah.
even the loneliness, it's like I can compound that with shame by saying I shouldn't feel lonely
Yeah.
because I'm with the people that matter most to me, or I shouldn't feel sad because I'm doing the most important work. Like we kind of compound it,
Yeah.
like pile it on.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, so you've talked about working on it. So I would love to know if you've come up with any strategies, because I know you recognize that this undercurrent is not healthy and is not true. So,
Yeah.
what do you do? How do you counteract those feelings?
A lot of what I do comes back to identity, and I almost feel like I'm beating the dead horse whenever I talk about it, but it's almost like any topic or any struggle you're facing as a mom, anything you're working through, it really comes back to identity. And I'm talking about something as simple as a habit you want to work on, or something as big as a really difficult decision you're trying to make about a kid and the way you're trying to navigate it. It comes back to knowing who you are and what matters to you. I was thinking about this today just because, like I said, my youngest turned 4, and I don't do birthday parties till my kids turn 8. And that was very much made as a young mom, knowing that I get really burnt out by doing a lot of the fantastical stuff with my kids. And my mom was amazing at that. Like our birthdays were always so fun. And it wasn't like extravagant. She just took a lot of time and she loved to throw them. She was really into holidays. And I'm kind of the mom who I don't think I've ever done Elf on the Shelf because I forget. I don't have that part of me inside of me. So in some ways I made that decision knowing, this is who I am as a mom, and it's great that other moms do this differently, but we'll start birthday parties at 8 and every other year. And but sometimes I still have that little shame voice coming in my head and the should saying, so and so does such a great job of this. I love how she does that. And is it bad that I haven't done that? Oh man, I hope my little kid isn't upset that they don't have a birthday party, even though they've never complained about it. It's been really interesting. They don't even notice. But anyway, I just am noticing that coming in too. So when I feel that anxiety, for me, it's really anxiety based, as well as coupled with the should voice. It helps me calm myself down and to be more confident in the choices that I've made, or to be confident about the pivot I'm going to make by just coming back to, well, who am I as a person and what matters to me? And as part of that, remembering I cannot be everything to everybody. And that includes my kids. Every child in a big family like mine has 7 kids has a different perspective of the same parenting they had from the same parents. And it's just a matter of going back to who you are, what matters to you, and doing your best with love. That always helps me come back to myself and feel more grounded in myself.
That's great. I often talk about how we can see all these people on Instagram, we can see all these examples of these wonderful mothers, and we can let it weigh on us and let it be heavy, or we can just let it completely liberate us, because it is not possible in any realm of the imagination to be able to do all those things that we see. And so knowing that we can't do all of it gives us permission to pick what we want and figure out who we are, and just be grateful that there are other people doing those other things, right?
And the thing about that is I think it also gives us the opportunity to celebrate other women and their differences. Like instead of feeling guilty that I'm not doing the same party as my neighbor down the street as she is for the same kid, the kid that's the same age as mine, I can instead know, like, this is who I am. That's who she is. That's awesome. Because I think that's where that mom shaming culture comes in, when moms are attacking each other. And I see that not as an attack on each other, although it is, as much as it is a defense
Yeah.
mechanism
Yeah.
against feeling like,
Insecurities.
yeah, it's like if I put them down, then I'm right. It's more about trying to prove and try to uphold again your identity as a good
Yeah.
mom because of the choices you've made, instead of just say no, it's okay that we do these things differently. Like I did cloth diapering for my three oldest kids, didn't for my fourth. That's a whole other story. But I mean, that was so easy to get wrapped up in too, is just being like, can you celebrate someone else's differences and can they celebrate yours? And just standing firm in those choices and how they represent your values and your identity.
And it's interesting that you bring up the diapering because I think a lot of the mom shaming happens in those early years
Oh
of
yes.
motherhood when there is so much self doubt and there's so many decisions to make. And you still think that there's a right way to do
Yeah.
everything. And that the sad thing is that that's the time that you need the most support instead of all that
Judgment.
shaming and judgment. You know, it's diapering, it's what you feed your baby, breast or bottle, it's all
Constant.
those decisions. And so much of it concentrates in those early, really hard, really emotional, sleep deprived years. And that it breaks my heart.
I know. And you look back on that and you just think, I would not want to relive that part of it. Just the urgency of trying to make the right choices, also knowing that the choices you're making now are going to be the choices you make for the next child and the next child. So it's not even just for like one kid, you're trying to make it for your whole future family. I remember totally falling for that right choice kind of lie with my oldest, especially. And one of the funny examples to me was just looking for her first sippy cup. Like I for some reason thought you just get one sippy cup and it lasts forever. Yeah. So I mean, I went down the internet wormholes for weeks looking for the right sippy cup. And I finally got it. It cost $12. I still remember that because it was a $12 sippy cup. And the biggest reason I did cloth diapering was to save money. So that was a huge expense. And I knew it was one that was stainless steel. It's going to last her a long time, going to keep things insulated. There's like a straw in it. She's like, man, this is the sippy cup. She did not use it. She did not want it. She could not drink from it. Eventually I bought, quite a few more, landed on like the cheapest one, also with the straw from not stainless steel, like just pure plastic. And now I know I have probably 100 sippy cups in a sippy cup graveyard, but that's what we do both as young moms, but also each stage we're at. It's like a whole new ball game there, right? You're still trying to make the same type of choices where you're like making a choice that is going to become both a practice in your family or a parenting tactic that you're going to use on the other kids. And it all feels heavy, and it all feels like there's only one right choice. But
Yeah.
it's just like the sippy cups. Like there isn't just one way to parent a 16-year-old who's struggling with friends. There's not one right answer that's going to work for us all. And I think that can be just like we were talking about, celebrating other moms' differences, like owning that there is very few instances of there only being one right choice in front of you. That is liberating because that allows us to move forward with curiosity about how we're parenting and being open to parenting different ways for different childs at different stages, and also liberating in that we can change
Yeah.
as we're learning and growing.
And it helps us support the people who are making those other decisions.
Yeah,
instead of judging them. So,
because it's not our kid.
yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
have the whole picture.
And I don't know a way to do it without going through it. I just rhymed. Because, well, first of all, you're really obnoxious if you tell that young mom that doesn't matter at all. Like, it matters to them, and you don't want to like patronize them or demean them by telling them that it doesn't matter. They have to learn that on their own, like what matters and what doesn't. So you have to go through it, but it's so hard.
It is hard. Yeah, like I said, I'm glad I'm not back in that stage of all the firsts and trying to figure it all out.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it took me 10 years to even get to the point where I feel like I am the mom now. Before I just felt like I was kind of playing the part and trying to figure it out. And now I feel like I am the mom. I am the mother.
Yeah.
And it feels different.
Yeah, and it's that identity piece that you were talking about before. You figure out what your style is, what your strengths are.
I'm just thinking that applies to what we talked about moving towards more of our own values and owning them, but it also helps us move towards our strengths, like you said. If we know who we are, then we also know, just alongside of our weaknesses, which the shame one's all about, the mom guilt, we can just as fully be aware of the strengths and make those be more of the driver and how we're parenting, even down to how we're doing those birthday parties, than the weaknesses and what we are not doing.
You can hear more of Monica's wisdom on her own podcast About Progress, where she teaches that life is about progress, not perfection. You can also access her coaching programs and courses at aboutprogress.com and follow her on social media at About Progress. Thank you so much for listening to the How She Moms podcast and for being part of this community. There are so many other ways for you to connect and hopefully also contribute. I share tips and ideas regularly on Instagram and Facebook at How She Moms. You can find past episodes and other resources at howshemoms.com. And you can always just email me directly at whitney@howshemoms.com. Special thanks to my own wonderful mom, Susan Singley, for recording my theme music. She played this song all the time when I was growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood. So why do you think we use the term mom guilt as opposed to just general guilt?